We are live.
Hello and welcome to Moreness-Culture. Good morning, Syl. Good morning, Grain. Good morning to everyone who is going to watch us live and record it later. If you are here by chance and if you are deliberately here, you are most welcome to join and be part of this Moreness community we are sharing almost every single day. Right now, we are busy with a big, huge project that we are doing the capital R reading of Carlos' books about Don Juan, with a very specific intent to connect with Don Juan. For newcomers who are new here, the capital R reading process is reading beyond words, reading beyond what has been shared vocally, verbally. And this is what we are doing. And of course, to understand the intent behind that, to extract value, even if it is not shared deliberately. This is the process of capital R reading. We have another process, which is the foundation of capital R reading, is to be receptive, capital R receptive for anything what we are reading, reading in terms of observing, reading in terms of watching, reading in terms of listening, and reading in terms of actually reading. So it can be anything. The capital R reading is a process. It's a name of that process where we observe and of course extract value. We set our intent to extract value.
Extract and connect to. Yes. Yes. Very important.
Even if it is not shared deliberately, even if it is not there, but we make ourselves able to extract value by being receptive, first thing, and by I always try to say that in that particular way, that try to be impeccable. Of course, I'm just saying about myself. You guys, hopefully you guys are impeccable. I'm just trying to be impeccable. So I'm saying that, okay, this is the key. And of course, it's a very practical implementation of Way of Impeccability. One of the aspects of Way of Impeccability we do every day. This is the proof that what we are doing right here, that it is about practical life and practical implementation of Way of Impeccability's perspective. Because we have this assumption, somehow we get a bit like, it gets a bit off that, oh my God, now it's philosophy, which means that it's all about thinking and intellectualizing all the things, which is, of course, very, very, very crucial and foundational step towards actually having something sustainable and, of course, towards moreness life. Thinking, but thinking it through to the end, and also make it usable and applicable in our life. We don't just think about things. Yes, we don't just think about things. We don't just talk about things. We do create a resolution, value, and understanding for ourselves, and then we apply it in our lives. This process of capital R reading is application of understanding, extracting value.
Exactly.
And of course, creating moreness in our lives. This is right now we are doing this application. How we do apply all these aspects of Way of Impeccability and perspectives. Whenever you will set, you will get this clear intent that I want to learn and grow. Of course, universe will provide you awareness. It happens almost every time, every single time. When someone has an intent to learn and grow, they always found or encounter opportunities to learn and grow.
If someone has an intent to learn and grow, they always...
I'm echoing, maybe I'm or what? Okay, anyway, so we are fixing. So whenever we have a clarity of intent about learning and growing, universe will provide us opportunities, amazing, amazing opportunities to learn and grow. And what we do it through Way of Impeccability is we do a power pause. We take a power pause and just try to understand things in its fullness, in its moreness, that, okay, yes, this is obvious. This is what I can see. What is going on behind that? Okay, this is what I can hear, but what is something which is not being said out loud? Okay, oh, this is something I observe, but this is, what is this which is not understood by me? Okay, this is how we do this process. And this is the application right there. And once we do that, once we become able to do that, or at least once we started to doing that, we started having moreness in our lives. Because you will be amazed by your own moreness, your own understanding and your awareness once you will have this clarity of intent. Way of Impeccability and Moreness-Culture, it's absolutely, absolutely about practical application of everything. There is nothing which you can just think about it, because the very simple thing is, it is not obvious until you make it obvious. How you can make obvious? By doing, by applying. Otherwise, it's all meaningless. So the way of impeccability is not about thinking. Yes, it starts from thinking. Like every other idea in your life. We all were some idea in the universe. We were not existing.
First thought, then understanding, which transcends thinking.
Exactly. The first step, yes, it's thinking. Idea. And then about application. There is nothing in way of impeccability which you can just think about and say, stay happy that, oh, yes, I understand. No, because you will not make it your own until you will apply it, capital A application in your life. Which means that you are not there yet. You are in a void. So it's very clear, very obvious in way of impeccability. This was my thought of the day, and hopefully Syl is done with all his sharing process. But we cannot see you, Syl.
I know. I was testing it there, so I will reset that in a moment.
Okay, so what we are going to do is we are going to start a reading of Carlos' books about Don Juan. And what Don Juan is sharing moreness. Don Juan is sharing different mediums to extract value and moreness. Sometimes we do get so fascinated by the mediums and sometimes overwhelmed by those mediums. It is not the real learning from that. What Don Juan was sharing was about having access to moreness. Go beyond the mundane, go beyond the obvious. So this is the complete, okay, at least this is the sharing for me from Don Juan. And I want to connect with Don Juan. So yes, I love all his mediums, whatever he's sharing. Of course, these mediums are not directly coming from him, but he's sharing. These mediums were coming from the lineage, and of course, his masters. I don't know the words they use for that, but his ancestors maybe. Okay, and okay, just a simple one in a simple way. His lineage. So what Don Juan is sharing, he's just sharing. He's not saying that, oh, this is my thing. No, like we don't say that, okay, this is my thing. Yes, we compiled, okay, at least I can say about Syl with clarity, absolute clarity. I'm just including myself as a privilege again. But Syl has compiled all those things to make it accessible and make it applicable in your life.
Yes, via the language of conceptionality, and also via way of impeccability, which uses a lot from Don Juan, but it's also found elsewhere, Buddhists, etc., and from all over the world, and also from my own practical creating things out of necessity. Yes, so there's a lot that goes into way of impeccability. It's taking things further. But the language of conceptionality, this is a skill that I bring, the ability to conceptualize things and put it into a conceptual terminology, like moreness and appropriateness. These are incredible conceptions that are transformative. Yes, it's just what I do. That's, everybody has weird skills. Okay, that's mine. So, among others. All right, let's continue reading. We'll continue where we left off last time. And if anybody wants to catch up on these, they're all on YouTube, right? The entire lives. Yes, there's also clips that we share on TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, but the full videos are all on YouTube, right? They're also in the group, by the way. You can find them in the SASI group, SASA group on Facebook. All right, so this is where we left off last time. Our difficulty in understanding, it seems, stems, no doubt, from the alien units of meaning with which it deals. Why does this seem so small here? All right, that's okay. Don Juan had once told me that a person of knowledge had predilections. Now, I changed that because, like I said before, I don't want to be inadvertently continuing this nonsense. Oh, a person of knowledge had predilections. I asked him to explain his statements. My predilection is to see, italicized C or capital SC, which I'm going to read as perceive. Yeah, because that's what it means. Seeing is just a term. Don Juan says much later on, he says that was influenced by the predominance of visual, but it actually is detrimental to see it that way, right? So Don Juan says, my predilection is to perceive. I'm going to read it as perceive because this is more accurate. He said, what do you mean by that? I like to perceive, he said, because only by perceiving can a man of knowledge know, can a person of knowledge know. What kind of things do you perceive? Everything. But I also perceive everything, and I'm not a man of knowledge. No, you don't perceive. Capital P, perceive. You don't. I think I do. I tell you, you don't. What makes you say that, Don Juan? You only look at the surface of things. You only perceive the surface of things. Do you mean that every person of knowledge actually sees through everything they look at? No, that's not what I mean. I said that a person of knowledge has his own predilections. Mine is just to perceive and to know. Others do other things. What other things, for example? Take Sacateca. He's a person of knowledge, and his predilection is dancing. So he dances and knows. Now, his predilection is dancing, but he dances, capital D dances, right? Carlos is not making the distinction there. Yeah, it should be, or italicized dances. So he dances and knows. Is the predilection of a person of knowledge something they do in order to know? Yes, that is correct. But how could dancing help Sacateca to know? One can say that Sacateca dances with all he has. Does he dance like I dance? I mean, I like dancing. Let's say that he dances like I perceive and not like you may dance. Does he also perceive the way you perceive? Yes, but he also dances. How does Sacateca dance? And you see why I am using the word perceiving. Because now we get to the mechanism. Sacateca perceives, capital P perceives, via the mechanism of dancing. For Don Juan, it's more visual and he calls it seeing, but if Don Juan is closer to just perceiving directly. You can perceive, capital P perceive, in many ways. You can do it through hearing, through dancing, through feeling, through art, through writing, all sorts of things. But there's a moreness, a profound moreness that gets added. You are disconnecting from the usual mechanisms and you are utilizing whatever your particular predilection is to get you to transcend yourself, to transcend your thinking, to transcend your abilities to connect to things, your abilities to put it together. You're going into an incredible moreness of perception. That's why I call it capital P perception, right? It transcends all of the usual ways of perception. And this dancing or hearing or writing or art or whatever your mechanism is, it is simply a means to the capital P perceiving. Now, Don Juan tends to go there very directly. He doesn't do it via dancing or something like that, right? But this makes it more clear. Carlos is not really shedding great light on here because he struggles to understand it. But when we look at it this way, it's pretty obvious, no, Beena?
Yes. Yes.
Right. How does Sacateca dance? It's hard to explain that. It is a peculiar way of dancing he does when he wants to know. But all I can say about it is that unless you understand the ways a person, the ways of a person who knows, it is impossible, and that should be knows, capital K knows. It is impossible to talk about dancing or perceiving. Yeah. And really, when we get to this later on, it's about turning off, switching off your internal dialogue. stopping the internal dialogue, internal silence, in other words. But it's not silence as in nothingness. It is to turn off the internal dialogue. Right now, in the East, it's that internal silence. But silence, many confuse with nothingness. And yes, technically, it does mean a kind of a nothingness. Yeah. But when you are silent, it doesn't mean you cannot perceive, and also that you cannot feel. But when we perceive without dialogue, it's a very different perception. And it's also perceiving without your usual feelings. Yeah. That's why I call it perceiving, capital P, perceiving. It's a very different experience, because anything else comes with a baggage, right? When we normally perceive, we interpreting via language, the internal dialogue. It's not actually perceiving. The perceiving is something else. The end result that we call regular little p perceiving is actually interpretation, right? So when I'm perceiving my monitor here, right, that's not actually what I'm perceiving. What I'm actually perceiving is energy in a particular configuration. I'm actually perceiving energy in a particular configuration. It gets translated through all the different filters and translation mechanism, and I call it a monitor. Yeah, but what it actually is energy. We don't perceive raw energy. We perceive it in its filtered form, yeah, which we put all our labels on of words, right? So that's the mechanism here. We're going to see a lot more about this, and we're going to hear a lot more about this. We're going to get examples of it, but I want to make it clear in the beginning so that we don't get caught up in this visualness that is there. That's why I changed the language, right? So capital P perceiving, yes, not a visual thing. Now, it's not any one sense thing. How does Sacateca dance? It's hard to explain that. It is a peculiar way of dancing he does when he wants to know. No, capital K, no. But all I can say about it is that unless you understand the ways of a man who knows, it is impossible to talk about dancing or perceiving. Have you seen him doing his dancing? Yes. However, it is not possible for everyone who looks at his dancing, right, to perceive that it is his peculiar way of knowing. Because we look through our filters, and our filters are limited. Our filters only tell us what we think we know. Yes? So we have to unhook from our filters in order to see past them. If you're setting out things to filter what you know, you by default aren't going to be able to perceive that which you don't know. And we don't realize we do this, but we do. Yeah, that's why I keep emphasizing part of the Way-of-Impeccability and Moreness project and Moreness-Culture. The world does not work the way we think it does. And that's why Moreness, and it's called Moreness-Culture, it is already in your brain. Oh, there's more. There's more than I'm aware of. Moreness-Culture. See? Just this concept alone starts to broaden your mind to be open to more. Yeah? I knew Sacateca, or at least I knew who he was. We had met, and once I had bought him a beer. He was very polite and told me I should feel free to stop at his house anytime I wanted to. I toyed for a long time with the idea of visiting, but I did not tell Don Juan. On the afternoon of May 14, 1962, I drove up to Sacateca's house. He had given me directions how to get there, and I had no trouble finding it. It was on a corner and had a fence all around it. The gate was closed. I walked around it to see if I could peek inside the house. It appeared to be deserted. Don Elias, I called out loud. The chickens got frightened and scattered about, cackling furiously. A small dog came to the fence. I expected it to bark at me. Instead, it just sat there looking at me. I called out once again, and the chickens had another burst of cackling. An old woman came out of the house. I asked her to call Don Elias. He's not here, she said. Where can I find him? He's in the fields. Where in the fields? I don't know. Come back in the late afternoon. He'll be here around 5. Are you Don Elias's wife? Yes, I'm his wife, she said and smiled. I tried to ask her about Sacateca, but she excused herself and said that she did not speak Spanish well. I got into my car and drove away. I returned to the house around 6 o'clock. I drove to the door and yelled Sacateca's name. This time he came out of the house. I turned on my tape recorder, which in its brown leather case looked like a camera hanging from my shoulder. He seemed to recognize me. "Oh, it's you," he said, smiling. "How's Juan?" "He's fine. How about you, Don Elias?" He did not answer. He seemed to be nervous. Overtly, he was very composed, but I felt that he was ill at ease. "Has Juan sent you on some sort of errand?" "No, I came here by myself." "What in the world for?" Yeah. We think we know how the world works. See, Carlos is in a world that he does not understand and does not know how it works. Yeah, and hence Don Elias's question: what on earth would you come here for of your own accord? You're in a world of power and you acting randomly and you don't realize this, right? And Carlos just he assumes that Don Elias also lives in his regular world. But Don Juan already told him, right, that Sacateca or Don Elias is a man of knowledge. Therefore, he lives in a world of power, which is a different world. Carlos didn't make the connection, right? It's understandable. I think, Don Juan sort of failed to understand just exactly how disconnected Carlos is from his world, and he has to make the obvious to Carlos, and he doesn't do so. Yeah, like in this case, didn't make the obvious here that Sacateca, Don Elias, lives in a different world, a world of power, and as such, you can't just willy-nilly go there on a whim. Just go there. You're dealing with power. It's dangerous stuff, right? Or at least it's in a different paradigm, and you need to be aware that it is. Okay. He did not answer. He seemed to be nervous. "Oh, no, I came here by myself." "What in the world for?" His question seemed to betray very bona fide surprise. "I just wanted to talk to you," I said, hoping to sound as casual as possible. "Don Juan had told me marvelous things about you, and I got curious and wanted to ask you a few questions." Sacateca was standing in front of me. His body was lean and wiry. He was wearing khaki pants and shirt. His eyes were half closed. He seemed to be sleepy or perhaps drunk. His mouth was open a bit, and his lower lip hung. I noticed that he was breathing deeply and seemed to be almost snoring. The thought came to me that Sacateca was undoubtedly plastered out of his mind. But that thought seemed to be very incongruous, because only a few minutes before, when he had come out of the house, he had been very alert and aware of my presence. "What do you want to talk about?" he finally said. His voice was tired. It was as though his words dragged after each other. I felt very uneasy. It was as if his tiredness was contagious and pulling me. "Nothing in particular," I answered. "I just came to chat with you in a friendly way. You once asked me to come to your house." Sorry, got visitors or people, they're working on the trees, and I don't know, it's but disconcerting when they move around here. Anyway, yes, I did, but it's not the same now. "What isn't the same?" "You talk with Juan." "Oh, don't you talk with Juan?" You see this, the question. It's a loaded question. Yeah. Carlos is not understanding the context in which he means it. Do you perceive the context, Beena? Do you discern the context? What
No.
Sacateca means when he says, "Don't you talk with Juan?"
Yes, I'm not getting it.
In other words, aren't you Juan's apprentice? Don't you talk and discuss all these things you need to know with? Yeah.
Okay.
Because look, he says, "You once asked me to come to your house." "Yes, I did, but it's not the same now." "Why isn't it the same?" "Don't you talk with Juan?" See, in the full context, you see?
Yes.
Okay. "Yes, I do." "Then what do you want with me?" Now it really gets to be clear. You see? "Yes, I do." "Then what do you want with me?" Carlos doesn't put it together. Yeah. "I thought maybe I could ask you some questions." "Ask Juan. Isn't he teaching you?" Again, the third time now, right? emphasis here to make it clear. He is, but just the same, I would like to ask you about what he's teaching me and have your opinion. This way I'll be able to know what to do.
Wow.
Right there, Sacateca's brain implodes.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
He's scrambling Sacateca's brain. This is like incomprehensible preposterousness. Why do you want to do that? Don't you trust Juan? I do. Then why don't you ask him to tell you what you want to know? I do, and he tells me. But if you could also tell me about what Don Juan is teaching me, perhaps I will understand better. Juan can tell you everything. He alone can do that. Don't you understand that? This is a major point that Carlos misunderstands. He alone can do that. In Carlos's world, knowledge comes from different sources, right? You get references, academics, you got all those notes at the bottom of books that you're referring to and whatever, right? All your references, right? Referential works. But in this world, only Don Juan can do it. Why? Because Don Juan is now energetically tied to you via attunement and intent. Yes? Different. Yes. Different way things work, right? Then why don't you ask him to tell you what you want to know? I do, and he tells me. But if you could also tell me about what Don Juan is teaching me, perhaps I will understand better. Juan can tell you everything. He alone can do that. Don't you understand that? I do. But then I'd like to talk with people like you, Don Elias. One does not find a person of knowledge every day. Juan is a person of knowledge. I know that. Then why are you talking to me? I said I came to be friends. No, you didn't. There is something else about you this time. I wanted to explain myself, and all I could do was mumble incoherently. Sacateca did not say anything. He seemed to listen attentively. All right, so there's something else about Carlos is that he's not coming to actually learn. He's coming to corroborate Don Juan, which is a very different intent. Yes?
Yes.
See? And in that world, if you're going to be an apprentice, you trust, that's it. And why does Don Juan trust Carlos to be an apprentice? Because attunement pointed him out. But Carlos isn't aware of attunement and that he is connected to Don Juan because of attunement. And as such, there's no doubts. Your trust is 100%. I was put here by attunement, end of story. See, doesn't compute for Don Juan. Also doesn't compute for Carlos. And he's missing now. Don Juan will talk about attunement without the word attunement, and it's not really that clear. Yeah, and he said you were pointed out to me, and it's not. That's why this term attunement is so powerful. Well, in language of conceptionality, it really makes a difference. This is really my major contribution to things. Yes. It adds this extra element that allows us to bridge this difference between the two worlds. Yeah, between any world, doesn't matter, only these two, right? It's a fantastic thing. Sacateca did not say anything. He seemed to listen attentively. His eyes were half closed again, but I felt he was peering at me. He nodded almost imperceptibly. Then his lids opened and I saw his eyes. He seemed to be looking past me. He casually tapped the floor with the tip of his right foot, just behind his left heel. His legs were slightly arched. His arms were limp against his sides. Then he lifted his right arm. His hand was open and the palm turned perpendicularly to the ground. His fingers were extended and pointing towards me. He let his hand wobble a couple of times before he brought it to my face level. He held it in that position for an instant, and then he said a few words to me. His voice was very clear, yet the words dragged. After a moment, he dropped his hand to his side and remained motionless, taking a strange position. He was standing, resting on the ball of his left foot. His right foot was crossed behind the heel of his left foot, and he was tapping the foot rhythmically and gently with the tip of his right foot. I felt an unwarranted apprehension, a form of restlessness. My thoughts seemed to be disassociated. the impact of energy on energy, of this absolutely different connectivity from a different paradigm, right? Which he's not a part of. No wonder he's going to feel disassociated, because he's not a part of that now. Being interacted with him, right? Because Sacateca perceiving him pushes energy out towards Carlos, and Sacateca's energy filaments are now interacting with Carlos's energy filaments on a very direct level. He's being perceived. It might as well be the same way in our world as somebody coming and putting their hands on you and literally feeling you with their hands, right? That would be the equivalent. But he's doing this energetically, right? I felt an unwarranted apprehension, a form of restlessness. My thoughts seemed to be disassociated. I was thinking unrelated, nonsensical thoughts that had nothing to do with what was going on. I noticed my discomfort and tried to steer my thoughts back to the situation at hand. But I couldn't, in spite of a great struggle. It was as if some force was keeping me from concentrating or thinking relevant thoughts. Sacateca is also a man of power, right? A person of power, Sacateca. So it's like, come on, you're messing about here, dude. Sacateca had not said a word, and I didn't know what else to say or do. Quite automatically, I turned around and left. Sacateca was influencing you with the force of his will and saying, go, dude, you're in the wrong place, the wrong time. This is inappropriate. This doesn't work. He didn't need to say anything. He just, yeah.
Yes.
Now we come to it. Later on, I felt compelled to tell Don Juan about my encounter with Sacateca. Don Juan roared with laughter.
You really have something to say about it.
He has to. He cannot. Carlos can't help himself, right? He tries to be sneaky and underhanded and not say, but he can't help himself. He has to confess. I mean, not that he was being sneaky necessarily. It's his academicsness, right? He's not being... He's just looking to corroborate Don Juan. He doesn't realize how inappropriate it is. So, all right, we excuse him, but it makes for a great gift for us. Because if Carlos hadn't been such an nincompoop, we would not have this interaction with Sacateca. And we might never know about using dancing to perceive. We get a fantastic illustration of it here, right? And we realize what Sacateca is doing. He's feeling, he's knowing, he's perceiving Carlos. He's perceiving Carlos's energy directly and to know his intent. And of course, his intent is, oh, holy crikey Moses. It's just kind of like nonsensical intent, right? And through that, dude, you don't belong here, go, right? We get this. We get this wonderful story that's an illustration of capital P perceiving. Now, the story is most marvelously enhanced through understanding it via capital P perceiving. Yes, it adds so much, because otherwise, when you see it through the lens of seeing or dancing, it doesn't quite have the same power, right? Capital P perceiving energy directly. That's the key here. Yes, the core essence of things. That's what Don Juan called it, the essence of things, right? Which is what energy is. But it's energy, capital E energy, because it's energy and intent. Yes, it's energy that has intent to it. Yes, not just random energy. Yes, but energy that has an intent. I mean, you could say a stone. You look at it and you see its energy. There's an intent to stone energy, which is stone intent. Yes, it may be an inadvertent intent. It's not the stone itself doesn't have that intent. It's the intent from the universe, right? The stone doesn't have a consciousness necessarily, right? It's inert. However, it's still an intent to stone, right? So there's stone intent there. Stone doesn't have its own intent on top of that, right? Whereas bird intent from the universe makes for a bird, but that bird now has its own intent. Yes? See?
Yes.
Make sense?
Yes.
I love this, Beena. I absolutely love this. It just, this elucidation is super, super powerful, and it really, really is very helpful, right? And I am assisting the understanding here, the capital U understanding, through my ability to elucidate. Because I've gone through this and other things over and over in myself, my own experiments, experiences, my own discernments of unraveling things from scratch without this, before I encountered this. And that process, I'm now bringing the fruits of it to bear. Yeah. Yes. Later, I felt compelled to tell Don Juan about my encounter with Sacateca. Don Juan roared with laughter. Of course, he's gonna laugh. It's very funny. Carlos doesn't get when Don Juan and Don Gennaro are amused. They don't get it, right? What really took place there, I asked. Sacateca danced. Again, that should be italicized or capital D. Sacateca danced, Don Juan said. He perceived you, then he danced. What did he do to me? I felt very cold and dizzy. He apparently didn't like you and stopped you from tossing a word at you. Now, I laugh because when Don Juan says, he apparently didn't like you, right there, I know Carlos is now going to fret about this. Yeah, he's going to fret about it. It's going to take his attention and he's going to shift from other stuff, right? Because this is stuff that's of issue to Carlos, right? Anyway, so he's going to get discombobulated. And stopped you, and he doesn't quite understand what stopping means. You know, he just thinks stopping is movement. That's not what he means. But anyway, right? You get this, right? And stop here should be capitalized, yes? Or italicized, yes. Right? A capital S stopped you. See how potent language of conceptionality is. If that had been a capital S there, we would know instantly. Yes? There's something in the dictionary of power. Yeah? How could he possibly do that? I exclaimed incredulously. Incredulous, yes, because you can't think of more than what you know. Very simply. See what I said? He stopped you with his will. Yeah. You know, I didn't remember that Don Juan had said this. It was just my understanding of what was going on. From that incident, I didn't remember at all that Don Juan had said he stopped you with his will. But because it's like a duh, right? When you understand, then you don't need to remember the stuff is a duh, right? What did you say? Now Carlos is getting freaked out, right? He stopped you with his will. Capital W will. The explanation did not suffice. His statement sounded like gibberish to me. I tried to probe him further, but he could not explain the event to my satisfaction. Obviously, that event or any event that occurred within this alien system of sensible interpretation could be explained or understood only in terms of the units of meaning proper to that system. Now, this is something that Carlos gets stuck on. He thinks you have to only, he doesn't know about the language of conceptionality. He is correct in what he says. In usual, most ordinary circumstances, you need to get inside the system and know its jargon and its language. Yeah, language of conceptionality is a bridge. Why? Because it uses language that works in the one context and also works in the other, but is an enhancement and goes further, right? So we have a starting point, like when I said stopped, we know stopped, but just by saying capital S stopped, oh, you mean a moreness to it. Oh, you mean there's some extra to it. And now our brain is able to make that jump from this one reality to the other. It's an incredible process. But that's what the language of conceptionality is, yes? And all those terms in our dictionary of power, they apply in a moreness context, but they also have application in the usual, regular, ordinary context, yes? But just less of an application, yeah?
Yes.
The moreness is in the moreness context. So it's a bridge, and that's the power. That's the power. So, yeah, I was hoping that I did invite Joseph, directly via messenger, because I do want to mention about abstract. And so when he comes, we'll pick that up. It's very important. Obviously, that event or any event that occurred within this alien system of sensible interpretation could be explained or understood only in terms of the units of proper meaning to that system. This work is, therefore, a reportage and should be read as a reportage. He's talking about this book now, right? The system I recorded was incomprehensible to me. Thus, the pretense to anything other than reporting about it would be misleading and impertinent. In this respect, I have adopted the phenomenological method and have striven to deal with sorcery solely as phenomena that were presented to me. I, as the perceiver, recorded what I perceived, and at the moment of recording, I endeavored to suspend judgment. Now, very good, Carlos. Right? And this is very commendable by Carlos. He at least has the sense to recognize that he's lost, he's out of his element, and that any interpreting on his behalf is going to be inaccurate. Right? That's it. It's just going to be, because he's clueless. He doesn't know what's going on. Look at this thing with Sacateca. He was completely clueless. All he could do was report what happened. No interpretation. And through that reportage, we are able to do the interpreting. Yes. And this is, we are able to, well, in this case, you know, I'm bringing my understanding to bear on it, right? And we get to understand it. Plus, I am presenting it via language of conceptionality, which allows us to make that bridge. And, you know, it's so little sometimes. Like that capital S stopped. It makes a difference, because when you hear it, you're stopped. Oh, Carlos was moving, he was trying to approach him or whatever, you know, or trying to leave, and he was stopped. No, but that's not what he means. He stopped him inside. He stopped his ability to perceive, to connect. He stopped his world. Yeah, he stopped his ability to relate. Yes. It's a very different stopped. It's like stopped in everything else. So the capital S stopping is a very powerful concept here. Yes. All right. Yes. Part 1, the preliminaries of perceiving. Again, for anybody watching this, I am replacing this word that you see there with perceiving, because this word is very, very biasing. Yes, it really makes the word that Don Juan uses and Carlos uses. It's very distorting, and it really puts a big bind on you. And Don Juan himself says this. It's an unfortunate term, and why they don't shift it to perceiving, I don't know. But this is the real power of the language of conceptionality, because you're training your brain to think conceptually. And it's incredibly powerful. It is incredibly powerful. Yeah. We are trained to think specific and detail, and it does not really benefit us when it comes to things like this. Yes, it does when you're doing things that require that. But you know, that doesn't, when it comes to capital K knowledge, to understanding, capital U understanding, that does not apply anymore. April 2, 1968. Don Juan, this is the start now of book 2 in Carlos's series, book 2 called A Separate Reality. Yes, we passed the introduction. This is where we're starting now. And this is interesting now that we are picking up at the end of book 1. We haven't in book 3, we are going to start all over again in 1960. Yeah. So we're continuing now after he comes back after the with La Catalina. Right? That was when he left, yes? So we'll come back now. April 2, 1968. And this is now right after book 1 has been published, yes? In 1968. I was saying 1967, but it's 68. Don Juan looked at me for a moment and did not seem at all surprised to see me, even though it had been more than 2 years since I last visited him. I put his hand on my shoulder and smiled. He put his hand on my shoulder and smiled gently and said that I looked different, that I was getting fat and soft. Now, look at the discernment here from Don Juan. The capital D diplomacy. Yes. In that gesture. He put his hand on my shoulder and smiled gently and said that I looked different. Well, just the first part there, right? He's reaching out. He's actually touching Carlos, which is an affectionate gesture with that gentle smile, correct?
Yes.
We've never had this from Don Juan before. At least not that it was reported, yeah? But
Yes.
after the absence, it's implicative. It is a welcome of a different kind. It's not like, hey, hello, Carlos, how you doing? See the contrast?
Yes.
Different, yeah?
Yes.
It's very, very kind, especially after while Carlos left. Yes? It is saying, Carlos, you're doing the right thing. You're okay.
Yes.
Right? You okay as a person, Carlos. You are accepting you're okay. See? Very important. Very, very important. Right, Beena? Makes sense?
Exactly.
Understanding
Yes.
Carlos's psychology. Yeah.
Yes.
Right. It's an acknowledgement of a lot. Right. And he said that I looked different, that I was getting fat and soft. I had brought him a copy of my book. Without any preliminaries, I took it out of my briefcase and handed it to him. It's a book about you, Don Juan, I said. He took it and flipped through the pages as if they were a deck of cards. He liked the green color on the dust jacket and the height of the book. He felt the cover with his palms, turned it around a couple of times, and then handed it back to me. I felt a great surge of pride. I want you to keep it, I said. He shook his head with a silent laugh. I better not, he said, and then added with added with a broad smile. You know what we do with paper in Mexico. I don't know why the copy left out the broad smile or broad grin. I think it was grin from the beginning, from the original thing. Anyway, I laughed. I thought his touch of irony was beautiful. Yeah. No toilet paper here. Thank you. I laughed. I thought his touch of irony was beautiful. We were sitting on a bench in the park of a small town in the mountainous area of central Mexico. I had absolutely no way of letting him know about my intention of paying him a visit. But I was certain I was going to find him, and I did. This is very important. It seems like a casual thing and a one-off here, right? Carlos meets Don Juan in this town. But there's no pre-arrangement because Don Juan doesn't have a phone or internet or anything like that, right?
Yes.
Well, there was no internet then, but he doesn't have a landline. They didn't have mobiles then too. And he doesn't have anybody that Carlos can call and arrange, right? There's no way to contact Don Juan. Don Juan isn't always even in the same place. Yeah? So, right, I had absolutely no way of letting him know about my intention to pay him a visit. But I was certain I was going to find him, and I did. This is their connection, their bond of apprentice and teacher, yeah, that allows for this, yeah, and the direct connectivity via intent, yes, and you know we think the world is spread out, and that's for our convenience that we have not only time as linear, but that we have space as 3 dimensions, and it's all spread out. It's actually a singularity. Everything coexists all, but it's very hard to perceive that and comprehend it. So we dimensionalize it in order to make it easy for us to connect to. Hello, Joseph. I'm glad you're here. A point, like omens versus anomalies. In a cousin language of Yaqui, an omen can be spoken of as esnagic. Esnagic. I'm hoping I pronounced that right. Esnagic. Right? It's S-N with a accent on the end, with a little squiggly on the end. I forget what that's called technically. And then Neijik. Esnagic. Which translates roughly as something you see. It is understood in the mind of a traditional person from the culture. Yes, the person's knowledge fills in a more total definition. And another way of saying that is that it is capital P, perceived. And this is an important understanding when it comes to omens, and I'll get to that when omens come into the story later, Joseph. Yes, which is again another reason why I use capital P, perceiving. Precisely for this, because if you don't connect omens with capital P perceiving, you're going to be completely and utterly lost. Yeah, you'll see later when we get to this. So yeah, good point, Joseph. While you're here, Joseph, you made a comment about, oh, it's very abstract, right? And I did respond to that, but stuff that's in my mind whenever there's an earnest point, and when there's ever this extra, it comes to me. Personally, I am very practically focused. Yes. Now, when you listen to me talking, you might not think so, as you mentioned before, and like you mentioned about intellectual and all this. No. And I was very adamant about saying I'm not, because it's a misperception, right? And furthermore, I want to make something very, very, very clear that's very important to understand. It's very nuanced. Yes. My abstract language, my abstract thinking, my abstract communication, my abstract elucidations, these are abstract, but their intent, their purpose is practical. If we are focused on the practical, if we get all the way and we go to capital P, practicality, which is the practicality when it comes to the practicality of things like spirit, we cannot avoid becoming abstract. So in order to connect to the practicality of matters of spirit, not spiritual, right? Spiritual has got all sorts of woo-woo, and who knows what that means. I have no idea. But when it comes to connecting to spirit, capital S, spirit, to get that to have a practical effect in our lives, we need to understand abstract. In other words, look at attunement. Yes. Now, when you were saying the other day, and I was saying the point and purpose of Way of Impeccability is joy. Part of Way of Impeccability is to live as a spirit warrior, and also the end point of Way of Impeccability is to live in attunement. Yes. And attunement, if you don't have joy as an intent for living in attunement, you're going to have a rough time of it. Yes. And also, it's obviously the intent is to connect to spirit, because that's why you're living as a spirit warrior. Attunement is all about connecting to spirit. It is being in attunement with spirit, or whichever term you wish to utilize instead. You can put in the name of your deity, or you can say the universe, source, energy, whatever you wish to call it. That's why I like attunement. It does not matter what you are attuning with. Some moreness, again, why I like the term moreness. But the point I'm making is that my abstract language, my abstract conceptionality is absolutely because of practicality. Now, the point I really wish to share here, Joseph, is because when we grow up, especially in cultures that are practically focused, yes, abstraction can get to have somewhat of a negative connotation to it. Yeah, it's too abstract, it's too complicated, and people steer away from it. And as a result, they never connect to certain abstract things because they avoid it, and they have a hole. They have a hole in their comprehension, in their moreness. Yes. Now, yes, they may be quite fine and okay, but it's a problem. It can become a problem. It's like an anti-abstract type of a thing. Yes. Same thing with anti-intellectualism. We can't be anti-intellectualism. I'm against the bogus BS intellectualism, but actual real intellectualism. This is just one path of understanding. There are many paths of understanding. Doing is a path to understanding, and so is intellectualizing, right? And we really need all of them. Yes, we may have a preference for one over the other. We have a predilection for one over the other, but we cannot avoid them entirely. Yes, we need to at least have a little bit of it. Yes, we may be focused more on the practical side, or more on the intellectual side, depending on how you are. But for instance, if you're intellectualizing and you don't actually practically do something, yeah, well, you're going to go hungry. You can't intellectualize eating. Eating, you have to physically, practically eat. Yeah. See, so there's always a combination between things, and we have to have that. So the point I'm making is that when I am using abstract, it is for a intensely practical purpose, and that practical purpose is attunement, which is a spiritual intent, an intent to connect to spirit. Yeah, and when so I try not to use spiritual, because spiritual has too much baggage. So I rather say an intent for immersion, connection, communion with spirit, with moreness, with source, with deity, with energy, with intent, capital I intent. Yeah. So it's very practical, very, very practical. I just want to make that really clear, right? Joseph goes on to say, yeah, an elder native woman was asked why the songs in her language and culture were so short, limited words. She said, our songs are so short because we understand so much. Yes. And that, I love this. I love this. It's exactly what I was saying. Very appropriate. Because those songs aren't about detailing all the details. They're abstract songs. Very simple.
Perfect.
It's all condensed in the abstract. It's like, the dictionary of power. It's not a whole long, big, long thing. I mean, really, you can condense your whole dictionary of power into a few terms like appropriateness and attunement and awareness, right? 3 A's. Very simple. There you go. Everything you want to have. From that, you can get to everything else. Yes? Yeah. So attunement is an incredible term. Appropriateness, incredible term. Yeah. They have so much to them, and everything falls under this. Everything falls under this. So yes, you don't need a long song. It's a connectivity. It's a reminder. It's a stimulus. It's that intent. It raises. So now, very powerful, very cool, Joseph. I love this. I love this. All right, so I want to make this point just about abstract and how powerful it is. We can't shy away from it simply because, like intellectualism, it's been abused. Yes, a lot of people shy away from practical, Joseph, because likewise, in their youth, when they were children, they were forced to do lots of practical things for no great big reason, and it put a negative connotation to practical. Yeah. So you get the reverse. You get the reverse. People are very anti-practical. It's quite fascinating, but they are. In the same way, they're anti-intellectual, anti-abstract. Yeah. So we have to be careful. We have to understand that these things all have their negative connotations, and that we have to connect into it in appropriate ways, which is why I try not to use that in my language, right? Attunement and appropriateness. Now you don't have the baggage of this particularness. If it's appropriate to be abstract, you're abstract. If it's appropriate to be practical, you're practical. If it's appropriate to be intellectual, you're intellectual. End of story. Now I'm applying appropriateness, not intellectual or abstract or academic or whatever. I do that because it's appropriate. And the baggage is not an issue. The negative connotations, not an issue. In other words, I am practicing and implementing this power conception of association management. The activity, which before I associated with whatever the negative thing is, that's gone. Why? Because I'm now associating with appropriateness, with attunement, which are magical things. So it is understanding the peculiarities of our brains. Association management is incredibly, incredibly powerful. And our entire mood, mindset, modality, mentality, attitude, and motivation especially can completely change simply because we relabel something. Simply because we relabel something. Everything can change. It's incredible. Such a small little tweak. We are crazy. Going crazy. I would say the negativity you shared for a certain way of being and intellectual can be a bit misleading. What you described is to me a pathological version of intellectualizing. Yes, there are people who are pathological about the intellectualizing. Yes. All I was, when it was for me, I was being very adamant to not be mislabeled. I may seem to be an intellectual. It's different to intellectualizing. Yes. Now you're saying intellectualizing, and originally you said, oh, I am an, right? It's a different thing, right? One is a label and a box. I use the tool of intellectualizing as appropriate. I use practical example as appropriate. I use whatever tool is appropriate. Why? Because this is what predominates what I do. If you want to put me into a box, call me an appropriatizer. There isn't really a word for it, but that would be it. That's what I do. Yeah, appropriatizing. I appropriatize everything. Whatever is appropriate, I do. My intent is to be appropriate. My intent is not to be intellectual, which is what makes an intellectual. They have an intent to be intellectual because the way intellectual in its usual context is, it has a status to it. It has that connection to, oh, look how clever you are, look how smart you are, look how learned you are, etc. That's not my intent at all. I couldn't care two hoots about people thinking I'm clever or smart or learned or well-read or all of this. Yeah, I may be some of it, but I don't care about it. It's not important. What is important is the value, the practical value of understanding via application. None of the rest is important. The end result, the practical end result is what matters. Yeah? So very different, right? So I'm not against intellectuals specifically. I'm against BS in general. Right? I'm against superiority paradigm nonsense and rubbish. Yeah, that's it. I mean, it's BS. Yeah, there's no real anything to it. It's just false ego status stuff. Yeah, to what end? Just to look smart. Look smart. Yeah. In traditional native thought, the key is balance. Yes. And I said capital B balance. As I mentioned, it's in our dictionary of power. It's absolutely important. Attunement, Joseph. Attunement is, you can say, it's all caps balance. Living in attunement, the intent of way of impeccability. The end, it's the last module. Right? When you put it all together, living in attunement, way of impeccability is the tools for living deliberately, which is to live deliberately in attunement. Because that's the most appropriate thing you can do. It's all based on appropriateness. The most appropriate way of living is to live in attunement. See how it all works together, right, Joseph? So now we get this living in attunement, yes? And this is capital B balance, or all caps balance even. Because when you're in attunement, absolutely, and you are actually living in attunement, everything is in balance. Everything is appropriate. Everything is in balance. It's really awesome. Huh? It's a magical thing. Yes. But see, why I prefer attunement to balance, because I can have my life in balance, but not necessarily be living in attunement. At least in how we typically understand balance. Yes. For instance, I've got the balance between my work and my private life. I've got the work between, family and friends. The balance between my relationship and my inner personal life. Yeah. I mean, you can have distortions. I can be overly focused on my inner personal life and neglect my partner and so on and so forth, right? I mean, all the problems that we have in life is when people get out of balance. But out of balance in ordinary stuff. And now you can have your life in balance and be living a wonderful life, but not necessarily be living the moreness life of living in attunement. Yeah? A whole different deal. A whole different deal. You're getting a level of extra, which is why it's Moreness-Culture. Yeah, Moreness. Yeah. Not extra as in quantity, no, moreness as in bonus, as in that which is sublime, profound. You don't have to have the profound in your life, but when you get it, it's like, wow, this is awesome, right? So very key, very key. We all have certain strengths, yes, but that doesn't mean, Joseph, that we need to be limited to our strengths. Yes. Our strength is a path that allows us to have that as a motivation. Yeah. But we've got to take that strength and go far with it and connect things to that strength. Yes. All the strength is just a different, a particular angle of approach. It doesn't mean that it's the only thing, right? You're still connecting to everything. You're just doing it via a particular lens, a filter, a style. Yeah. That's all, right? Our challenge is always to strengthen what is weak while continue to use the strength. Exactly. Again, with the balance, right? And your strength gives you that leverage from that perspective, right? As Don Juan said, you can't put power in a cracked jar, it will burst. Yes, exactly. Yes, exactly. And that's why it's living in attunement is totality. Yes. And why way of impeccability? That's what way of impeccability is for. It is so that we don't have a cracked jar. Yes, our culture Our culture by default makes us correct. Our culture by default makes us correct. Yeah. So I'm talking about worldwide culture, superiority paradigm. It's correct by default, makes you correct. Yeah. So this way of impeccability is to not be correct. Yes. And it's not perfection. Something else. At least the way typically people understand perfection. I redefine perfection to make sense, right? Because the standard understanding of perfection, oh, perfection is impossible. Absolute nonsense. But anyway, so I prefer appropriateness to using terms like perfection or moreness. Yes, much better terms. Like I say, perfection has too much baggage. Yeah. So this is the intent, the way of impeccability, right? Put it all together. And also, yes, because of the term impeccability, it overlaps with a lot of what Don Juan says, right? Because he uses the term a lot. But it could just as well be called the way of rightness, because that was my term for impeccability when I grew up as a child. But I prefer impeccability because rightness has even more baggage than impeccability. Impeccability has some baggage, by the way. A lot of people say, oh, but I can't be impeccable. Nobody can be impeccable because that's like being perfect, making no mistakes ever. Who can make no mistakes? No, impeccability is not about making no mistakes, right? So there's also baggage to impeccability, but we have to make do with the best that we have, right? It's very important. So way of impeccability is the toolbox. And I add a lot of tools. Right? I add a lot to Don Juan is using it only as a term. Yes, yes, there is extra to it, but I have added as a way other things that enhance our ability to be impeccable. Yes, so it's just making it more potent. Yes, like I said, Joseph, at some point you'll have to come and do way of impeccability that we can have an overlap of language. Yes, yeah. Now that doesn't mean that you're buying into my system. No, it's just a toolbox. It's just a toolbox. And it makes for, like the language of conceptionality, it makes for overlap. And because language of conceptionality, like I was saying earlier, it is a language that allows us to take our regular language and apply it to alternate realities, apply it to moreness realities. Yeah, because there's an overlap. We're taking the language of what we already know and we applying it in a moreness context. Okay. And we are able to make that bridge. Otherwise, we get stuck like Carlos, where he can't comprehend because he doesn't have the language, right? And it's like when you go and speak to people in a very particular field and they have that jargon, right? Like IT guys and they have all the IT jargon, or doctors or engineers. And you don't know what they're saying because they're using the jargon, right? Now, if they had a jargon that was based on regular language, which some jargon is, then you could make that connection because you've learned to think conceptually. And when we learn to think conceptually, that's why it's not the language of conceptions. It's the language of conceptionality. Training the brain to think conceptually. And then we can make that conceptual leap. It's not a problem. Our brain is already trained and we can make that jump. And it's like, all right, I get it. I just have to go further. I have to get into moreness. It's simply brain training. Yeah, that's all it is. So we have to fix the cracks first. Oh, yeah, I read that. Yeah. Oh no, I did. So we have to fix the cracks first. Exactly. Which is why Don Juan has to change Carlos's worldview first. Exactly. His old worldview couldn't hold the abstract power. Precisely. It's what I've been saying. So nice. That in way of impeccability, what you just did there was a repeat back, saying what's been said in your own words. And it's incredibly powerful. See, this concept of repeat back as applied right there, you're putting it in your own words. Now, in this case, you already know this, but when it comes to something new, that is a new awareness, a new understanding, when you put it in your own words, what happens? You make it your own. And when you make it your own, it comes to be practical. See, always practicality, always with me and with Beena, with what we do, it's always practicality at the end of it. Right, Beena?
Absolutely. Because otherwise, I will not be the person who I am today.
Exactly.
There would be no change.
Exactly.
No, it's all just thinking, all wonderful, like reading a novel or something.
Exactly.
Then I would not be a person who I am today.
Yes. Yes. I love what Don Juan brings to the table. Now, keep in mind, I may have mentioned this before, Joseph, but in case you weren't here, I didn't come to Don Juan and Carlos in the usual ways. Don Juan and Carlos were the result of a very profound, sustained, unbending intent on my behalf. Yeah. They came as a result of an intent, very specific intent. I won't go into details because I've already said it many times, but that's how they came to me. Furthermore, Don Juan and Carlos came to me at the end of a massive study that I did, which was to read all the classics in the world. Yes, all of them, all around the world. Yeah, that came at the end of a lifetime already of figuring out stuff for myself, creating my own stuff, doing my own studies in my own complete bubble world, which was a great boon that I did not have anybody else, because I was in my own private world. From age 6, I had this understanding that I needed to have a public self and a private self. Now, my private self wasn't secret or hidden. It was just private. Yeah. In other words, it wasn't openly shared. But if somebody had asked, I would have shared. But anyway, in that private world, it was a bubble world. And it was wonderful that it was a bubble world, because it protected me from, if I'd shared with anybody, say, what the hell are you thinking about stuff like this for? What's wrong? What's the matter with you? And stuff like that, right? And it's like, but you can't be doing this stuff. I mean, like, who are you to be doing this stuff? I heard that stuff about other things, and it would have applied to me, and it could have potentially put a great dent in my activities. But because I was unrestrained and uninhibited, I took things, and I fortunately had developed the tendency to be very thorough and to think things through to the end. So there was no limit. Anybody can do what I did if they just simply had the intent to do so and persisted. I was very persistent and thorough because I had my own motivation to do so, right? So I want to make this very clear, Joseph, that by the time I came to Don Juan, yes, I had, first of all, figured it out for myself a lot of what overlaps. Yes, there were some new things. There's always new because it's always more. But the core stuff that in other words, when I came to Don Juan, the majority of what he was saying was absolutely not new to me. Not only because I had figured it out for myself, but also in the reading that preceded Don Juan. I mean, I see tons of overlap with the Eastern philosophies. Yes, tons of it. I mean, it's a massive overlap, right? And I mean, there are people who've written books about all the stuff that Don Juan says. One guy in particular, I mentioned his name before, Richard. I think it's Richard B. DeMille. Yeah, Richard DeMille. You can go look it up. Where he says, "Oh, this comes from here, and this comes from there, and this comes from anyway." So when I came to Don Juan, what was new and what I did like was the language. Because like the Buddhists, they say a lot of wonderful stuff, but their language is outdated. It's old. Language was very important. And I've taken Don Juan's excellent usage of language and taken it even further, yeah, in developing the language of conceptionality. So this was my intent, to find the good language. And when I found that, so okay. And then as you get into it, it's like, hey, it's not enough, right? There are many things missing from the language here, like attunement, appropriateness, just 2 things, right? And that are massively important. I mean, that word attunement is so huge, and moreness, of course, so huge, but never mentioned, right? So a lot of fun stuff. I'm just saying, Joseph, that when reading Don Juan, as wonderful as Don Juan is, it doesn't mean that we cannot go more. And Don Juan says this himself. Yes. A warrior takes what has been shown and takes it further. If I remember the exact quote. Yeah. So this is very important. And I took this to me, well, that was something that I did before I heard that from Don Juan. It was always part of my way of being. Whatever I came into contact with, if I took it further, if there was further to go, I always thought everything through to the end. And that's just how I learned growing up, right? It was any word, any concept. Because if you don't think it through to the end, you have to think it again. you end up wasting the time that you thought about it because you didn't finish, and then you have to redo it. And I don't like wasting my time. From age 11, time, the preciousness of time was a real pressure on me. Yeah, just using death as an advisor, right? To put it in Don Juan's language, I thought about death, and that was my conclusion. Time is precious, and ever since then, I never wasted any second. So I don't want to be rethinking things. That's why thinking things through to the end is so critical. Not only does it help you save you from wasting time, but the other reason it's important is when you've thought it through to the end, you have a building block that you can utilize. If you haven't thought it through to the end, you can't utilize that building block. You cannot use it as a building block because it's unfinished, see, or potentially unfinished. Now, 95%, the 5% may not make a difference, but it also may. So you can't trust that building block because it may be that it ends up to be completely something else, which sometimes happens. That last little bit, yeah, it changes everything. So very powerful, very powerful. So I'm bringing, what I'm saying is, and it's not about me being some kind of specialness or anything. No, I've simply made an effort to do something that adds tremendously to what Don Juan has, adds to the Buddhists, adds to any philosophy, adds to my own philosophy. The language of conceptionality adds to my own philosophy that I created. You know, the way of rightness, which was what I grew up with in my own world, which that's the way I thought of things. It's all about rightness, capital R rightness. And attunement was, I didn't use the word attunement, but for me, it was the land. That was the term I used, connecting to the land, right? Or now I would say the earth or the world or the universe rather, but I thought of it as the land, capital L land. So again, language makes a big difference, right? All I'm saying is that, when listening to what I'm sharing, just be aware that I am bringing something to what Don Juan says. And not just what Don Juan says, but, what, for instance, the Buddhists say, or a lot of the Eastern Vedic, go further than the Buddhists even, right? Vedic culture going all the way back to early Sanskrit writings, all that stuff, right? It overlaps. But I come at it all in a very unique way, yeah, because I have my own history of figuring it out in the first place, right? So I reinvented the wheel, let's put it that way, yeah. But I also bring some things which really make a difference to all of this, like the concept of appropriateness, the concept of attunement, the concept of moreness. I mean, just to mention 3 out of many, this is something that I'm bringing that really makes a difference, really makes a difference. It's just helpful. I'm mentioning it from a practical point of view, yeah, Joseph, because it allows us to connect to Don Juan through this filter, through this lens, through this language, and the end result here is practicality. Yeah, I'm making a connectivity to this knowledge, which isn't unique to Don Juan. Let's just be clear about this, right? And Don Juan will tell you that too, but that he shares. Correct? He's not the originator, but at least not of all of it. But what Don Juan shares is also shared elsewhere. But what I'm bringing here in our capital reading, the intent of it is to be able to utilize this. And I bring tools of utilization, tools of practical implementation. And that's what I'm trying to communicate here, right? To be aware, to separate out. Because when you have that clarity, then we can say, okay, yes, I like what Don Juan's saying. Yes, and I can focus on that, and I can use Syl's tools. Now, Syl brings some philosophical concepts himself. Okay, then I can connect to that. And I never ask anybody to believe me. And it's another conception that I bring, self-evident sensibilities. Yes, this is what Way of Impeccability is based on. I don't want you to believe me. I want you to believe me. No. There must be a self-evident sensibility and, making it your own. This is an incredible conception, this understanding, because what I really do bring to the table is the psychology of learning. Right, Beena?
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah. All right. We'll leave it there for today. Any questions, Joseph? Any questions? Or any points extra to add? Any comments? I'll give it a moment, and while we wait for Joseph to respond, Samantha Barnes. Samantha Barnes, you're going to have to comment a little more. I need to get to know you a little bit more because I see you here regularly, Samantha Barnes, and I want to know some more. I want to connect with you. I want to connect more with you, Samantha. And like Beena said, anybody's welcome to join us. Yeah, if you want to come on Zoom and you can be a part of the session and we can really get inside you and your thinking and hear about you. Joseph has joined us on Zoom. He's of course welcome to do so again, as he
Oh,
knows.
yes, always,
So,
always, and it would be
but
fun.
anybody is, this is an open, and that's what we called it. It's, and Norma still refers to these lives as opens, because that's
Yes,
how we started, as the opens, right? And they're
yes,
open. So, Samantha, I'm keen to hear, any comments you have, Samantha, any questions, please share them, right? And I
yes,
love that I see you regularly, Samantha. I do love this, and it means a lot. It means a lot to us, right? And so we feel a connection with you. And all right, of course, you don't need to. It's no obligation, but we'd appreciate it. Let's just put it this way, and we're opening an invitation for you to do so, right? To connect, share,
yes.
ask questions, whatever you may ask. And there's no such thing as a stupid question. Never, 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 never. Or comment.
Okay, I just wanna add something here because once when we started these lives, we had this. Okay, we have been doing this on and off, but once we started these regular lives, the very specific and very clear intent was because Syl says that okay, I'm doing these lives for myself, where I'm going to share my moreness without having any restriction, filter, or anything. Because yes, we understand that sometimes it is too much for other people. Of course, it could be too much for me. Sometimes it could be too much for anyone. But these lives were started with a very specific intent that Syl wants to share the fullness and the completeness of the moreness he has. So yes, his responses towards things goes into details, like, okay, yes, very much detail. This is what the intent behind these lives. We used to do other lives, okay, yes, and we have our, of course, the platform available for Way-of-Impeccability and Zoom sessions where people can come, and of course, you will see a different side of Syl there. But these lives are very, very specific. And I love that, okay, Norma, you coined this term for that open, because we are sharing openly what we have to share. Okay, of course, I'm just including myself, mainly to Syl, but we are sharing the completeness and the fullness. Of course, moreness is always growing. It's not limited. It is not stagnant or something. But what right now in this moment, whatever comes, Syl share completeness, the fullness of the moreness he has right now about this particular aspect. And that's why it is, of course, it goes abstract, it come back to regular. The only thing is that when you see and when you hear something that, okay, it is abstract, just stay with us, because always, I can say like almost always, it comes back to the center column. It is always connected. It is not something which will go just randomly out of, like, okay, yes, out in the sky. No, it is like some planets have very big orbit, some have very small orbits. Of course, it takes a very big time, very lengthy time to complete one orbit. Yes, because the planet is bigger. Exactly same. The concept, if the concept is bigger, it is going to take much more time to get back to the same point. But I have never seen or never attended any Zoom session ever, in which that, okay, that the abstract point never come back to the center point. Always, always, always. Okay, if by chance if something happened, okay, we are not connected, you can remind us. But it is always connected with the bigger concepts, with abstract concepts. We have to stay. We have to stay connected. Then, okay, till it will come back. This is how it is. We have. I have always Way-of-Impeccability sessions are designed by Syl in this particular way that it goes bigger and bigger and bigger and always come back to the point. This is how the kite format. You started with a smaller point and then you go and you abstract and then coming back to the same point. So it is always connected to the center column, and this is what we have. Yes, I love when it goes abstract, because this is where I feel that, okay, yes, now it is making connection. I love when it is very local, very, very personal. Yes, I love that because it's an analogy. This is application. When it goes into like personal and local, it's a application point of view, perspective of application. But when it goes to abstract, this is where you see the moreness. This is where you see that, okay, now it makes sense that how universe is responding. Just a simple thing that, okay, oh, I was thinking about like why people lie. Of course, many reasons. I'm not accusing anyone that it is wrong or right or bad or good. No, just why lying is a big deal and what impact it has. So when Syl mentioned that, okay, Beena, it is okay, this type of lie is about this thing and it has these kind of implications and of course effects on people's life and how it affects. But when we go on to the bigger concepts and when we connect it to the universe, then we understand that why everyone is so against that and why it affects the overall theme of the universe. So we need to have both the abstract and the local concept and the understanding of it. And this is something rare. I personally feel that, okay, maybe it is available, but it is very rare one where you can actually find both the connectivity of the local and of course connectivity with the abstract. I love this. Thank you so much, Joseph, for bringing this point because you see that, okay, how much moreness came out of it. Love this. Thank you so much for doing that.
I have a story. I have a story for Joseph.
Today you want to share it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I know it's a bit late, but it's not long. It's maybe 10 minutes, 5-10 minutes, something like that. Yeah. Okay. All right. Let me just close this here. All right, Joseph, are you still with us? I hope so. Yeah. You with us, Joseph? Yeah. Because Joseph asks, what brought Beena to this world? And I'm assuming you mean this world of the moreness world, yes? Yeah?
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
Are you here, Joseph? Because otherwise, I won't share if you've left already. I want to know you're here, Joseph. I got a short story I want to read you to answer your question. I want to answer your question in detail. Or in moreness. I want to give a moreness answer to your question.
Yes.
Joseph, are you here?
Okay, we can share it tomorrow.
All right. All right. We'll share it tomorrow, then I'll answer your question tomorrow. Okay. All right. So I'll answer your question tomorrow, Joseph. Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Very cool.
Okay. Okay. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. Samantha on IG. Okay, please. Next time if you come, please just leave a comment so we can actually see that because sometimes we miss that and it is completely. It's not deliberate that we really love to connect with people, and if you're there, and because we have seen you many times that you are joining us and listening, so just leave a comment so then we can connect also. And it's same for the YouTube also that, okay, if you're there, because we see that, okay, a lot of views, sometimes like 16, 27 views, but no comment. So if you guys will leave a comment there, just say hello, hi, that would be very grateful. That would be very great for us. And we love to connect with new people also. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so much, Syl, for sharing all these things. I just, okay, as always, I just want to say that, okay, if you are here by chance or deliberately and you find some value, and if you don't find any value in any situation, in any case, please make a deliberate choice. This is the first step. This will be a first step towards your deliberate living. Deliberate living means that you are empowered enough to make appropriate choices for your life. It is actually taking control of your life. Because in this world, we can go really crazy with the randomness of the online algorithm, which of course ultimately affect our life algorithm. They are the same. Start making deliberate choices about your training your online algorithm. By clicking like or leaving a comment, because you are making sure that universe or your online algorithm, even in this case, understand that this is something where your attention is. And attention, every attention is a connection. So please do try to make appropriate connections. Don't just watch the random videos if you don't want to, because this is something, it's against the deliberate living. The first step towards deliberate living is, please train your online algorithm by making appropriate emphasis and focus, which is, of course, the terms and the way is to click like, subscribe, and of course, leaving a comment there. And if on top of that, the super generous thing would be ask a question. That will be a love note from the universe for us. Thank you so much for joining us. We will see you guys tomorrow.
The application of capital A attention, in other words.
Yes. Yes. Thank you so much, Syl.
On that note, we'll see you all tomorrow. Bye-bye, 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 everybody. Bye-bye, bye-bye. Bye-bye, Beena. Bye-bye, Beena.